Welcome to Lost in the Desert, episode 22. Today we have a special guest, Ms. Sara El Hassan, Sudanese activist, beloved by all.
Ooh, let's not. I don't know about that word now.
Well, really,
Let's.
people think of you as one of the pillars of our community, especially for the diaspora.
That is awkward.
Really?
Yeah, I
Okay, how would you
don't.
describe yourself then?
Person.
Person. Okay, fair
Person.
enough. All right, how about this very special Sudanese person?
Thank you.
Better
There we go.
beloved in our community. Just Sara, really grateful you're able to come here.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
I feel like this was a little overdue, but where we were in the show, just the conversation is overdue. There you go.
Mm,
Having this conversation about Sudan, what's currently going on, is a bit overdue for us on the show. But when all this was happening, and what also these people were dealing through, I feel like I wasn't really mentally ready to have it, and the show
yeah,
wasn't really. We were still learning and getting comfortable. So I think now is a good time to have that conversation, especially because sadly I feel like the noise is sort of dying down, and
absolutely.
not
Well,
in
I
a
was gonna
positive
say that.
way.
I was gonna say like the first 3 months. I don't think any of us knew what was going on. Like
Mm-hmm.
just the sheer shock and then having people at home to worry about and all of that. I don't think I was in any position. I mean, I've been covering it since the beginning, but it's literally just been, okay, what happened today? And then listing it out, but there's no processing happening.
You still have your. You still have your like daily or every 2 day recaps that you have, and it'll be like
Yeah.
day 140 something, day one. I'm like, damn, she's been doing this for a
It's
while.
wild. It's wild, but at the same time like I think I'm still in shock and I've been trying to use the recaps to sort of process things, but there's no processing happening. It's just like, oh, I can't believe today is day 130. I can't believe it's been 130 days of
Jeez,
this. Right?
man,
It's
130
wild.
freaking
It's
days.
wild. Of war is
Yeah.
is what we're talking about.
So for context, guys, for people who don't know, obviously Sudanese people listening to this are probably going to know. For you,
Right.
the rest of you guys, Sudan is a little country. Sorry, it's a big country
Yeah.
with little coverage, right underneath
Facts.
Egypt, Northeast Africa. We are currently experiencing a civil war slash internal conflict just between our our main military, the Sudanese, and the Rapid Support Forces, which is a paramilitary. And for those who also don't know, a paramilitary is an organization structured similar to military, operates similar to military with kind of permissions like it, permissions given usually internally, but are not obviously associated
Mm-hmm.
like directly. So today we're just going to talk about what is going on. We'll get a little brief history of Sudan, what is going on, what the conflict is, a little how it started, and how we can resolve and what the Sudanese people are going through. So appreciate you guys. Just stick through to the end. Really learn something new because we don't get much of any coverage. It was like
Right.
a month of the media, and it's usually
Not
like three
even.
pages,
Not
third
even.
pages or
Yeah.
something. So let's talk about Sudan, right? So Sudan is a country that's really is a East African country, ex-British colony,
Yep.
and as most countries that that were colonized, just in complete turmoil as soon as
Yeah.
it's been downhill since the 50s, right? Since we gained
Since
independence,
since 1956, pretty
yeah,
much. Yeah.
it's been pretty downhill. We've had um, multiple militaries, presidential regime, taking over the country. Al Bashir is probably the worst.
Yeah.
What do you, from your perspective, what do you think is probably then the biggest consequence of having Al Bashir? Um,
I
that
mean,
kind of led up to this, at least.
let me count the ways. Like, there's been so many just devastating impacts from 30 years of being under military rule. For one, you have, I mean, if we're looking at it from an American perspective, the complete lack of democracy and free speech. And then think about like generations growing up with no concept of what it is to even be able to speak your opinion, right?
Okay.
You also have 30 years of active destruction of like institutional aspects of the country. So, for example, part of the Bashir regime's claim to power, their way of holding on to power was to make sure that everything was internal. right?
Right.
So even if you work within the government, you don't really have access to services the way that people who are in leadership do, right? You are always under the the threat, I guess, of your that service being stripped away, your whatever little right you have being stripped away. And they, I mean, we had maybe 2 years of a democratic government from, I want to say, 81 until 83, and then different, like,
Oh,
then there
that's
was
the
another coup.
generation where that's the generation with where like our parents like just brag about Sudan. They
Yeah,
tell you that
right,
they tell you the
right,
80s, the 80s was it.
right.
And then after that it's like,
Yeah. But then, then you have Al Bashir coming in 89 and completely dismantling any semblance of like structure there, right? And everything becomes this internal mob control, right? Where you
Mhm.
have a few leaders who have control over everything and they divvy up the profits of whatever they get. We had oil, we were an oil rich country, and that the people didn't see any of that, right? So many
So
different natural resources that Sudan has were completely exploited by the Bashir regime, right? And so then you have from 89 to 2019, 30 years of just brutality. People are living in silence, but also in fear, right? You have everything centralized in the capital, Khartoum. That's where the government lives, that's where the president is, and that's where all the services are, to the detriment of the rest of the country. The rest of the country has nothing,
mhm.
by and large, has nothing. Then you have, there are a lot of different reasons why people think these different internal conflicts started across Sudan. But one of the arguments is that you have these areas that are rich with natural resources, like the West in Darfur, like Blue Nile in the South, and then you have wars starting there, started by the military government, right? And that's, I think, I mean, the Darfur conflict is like the most
It's the one,
famous.
yeah, everybody talks
Right.
about. It's been covered on the news for
When I
years.
came here for college, that was the first thing anybody said to me. Where are you from? I'm from Sudan. Darfur, right? It was like that. Like, that's how famous it was. They didn't know where Sudan
They
was.
said
They didn't.
Darfur.
Yeah, but they just knew that one
Yeah,
word.
how close are you to Darfur? All that stuff. Did
Right.
you see? I'm like, no, bro. Sudan's a huge country.
It's
It's like
right.
bigger than
It's
Texas, I think,
massive,
right?
right?
Like, come on.
So yeah, so you have things like the conflicts, like the Darfur conflict, and that's where this rapid support forces that we talked about earlier,
Mhm.
that's where they're born, right? The Bashir government decides we need another force to fight this war for us.
And also sort of like hide accountability as well, like minimize
That
accountability.
too,
Like we all know they have something to do with setting it up. However, because if they're not officially tied, it's
right?
sort of a little.
You can argue that, oh, this is just a tribal conflict, right? And that's
Mm,
kind of how people painted it, how it was painted in the media at some point in time, that this is just a tribal conflict. These are people fighting amongst themselves. We have nothing to do with this, whatever, whatever. But anyway, you have 20 years of that, right? At which point, or at some point within that 20 years, Bashir decides, oh, this rapid support forces, at the time, that's not what they were called. They were called the Janjaweed, right?
mm-hmm.
These Janjaweed have done so well for me, right? They fought my war for me. I'm going to now legitimize them. That is how I'm going to reward Hemeti, who's the leader of this group.
Right.
This is how I'm going to reward him. I'm going to make this band of whatever, I'm going to make them into an official force, right? That's when the rapid support forces, that name comes in.
Okay. That's actually very interesting. I was still under like for a long time under I thought the Janjaweed were still their own thing, and some of them broke off. I didn't know it was the whole thing. So part of
Well,
my little ignorance here.
I mean, it's a complicated situation. I think it was one group and then it split into two. This was before, but eventually Hemeti rose as like Al Bashir's weapon, right? Became very close to Al Bashir. Yeah, I mean, he used it.
His main
Yeah,
sidekick, I guess. Yeah.
basically. Bashir used him, and he used to call him Himaiti, which means my protection. Yeah,
Oh, Himaya.
right. So literally, he's protecting me. He's keeping me in power, right? And the way, like I said, the way to reward him is to give him now this official title. You are now leader of the Rapid Support Forces, which is,
Okay.
you know, part of the Sudanese government in some way.
Oof.
Anyway, we can fast forward
Yeah,
through
we
all
could
of
do
that,
all of that. Now
right?
2023 kicks in.
Well, before
Oh,
2023.
okay.
Now
Bet.
2019 kicks in. December 2018. Sudanese people have had enough. 30 years,
They said screw it.
right, of not only oppression but also active resistance against that oppression, right? And you've had people who were killed, assassinated, exiled. You have, I mean, these 30 years, people weren't just sitting around
And it
taking it,
and
right?
it was very quick. It just because I remember I grew up my entire life. I was even though I was born in the U.S. Right, basically from like 6 onwards, I was stable in Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was it until I got to college age, like 17 or something, and I
Mm-hmm.
left. But my family is still there, huge family, and growing up in Sudan, you can see the transition, you can see
Oh,
the decline, and
totally.
remember like what things were when I was younger. And younger doesn't even mean a lot because it could have been like 3 years ago
Right.
versus the 2018. And when I came to 2018, yeah, things were more expensive. Things were a little unstable, but weren't that bad. I came in a year later, 2019, December 2019, complete flip.
Oh yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean that's the thing. Like a lot of the one of the arguments against the revolution, basically what happened in December 2018 until April 2019, is people started protesting actively across the country on a daily basis. Right? They were once again met with just waves upon waves of violence. Right? You have the police out there. You have the military out there shooting people, shooting peaceful unarmed
Mm-hmm.
protesters, right? But it didn't stop anybody. So until April, you have this steady wave of protests, and for the first time in 30 years, it's it's been sustained, right? I mean, in the past we've
You
had
always
sort
have
of
small surges.
uprisings, right? But they didn't really. I mean, they were so quickly squashed that they don't even. I mean, people didn't even count them, right?
I think was it 2007 or 2008 when there was an attempted coup like Fil Qasr, and it literally lasted like one day. Because
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know if you remember what they used to call it, the American Club, now it's the International Community
Mm-hmm.
Club.
Yeah.
I was there during like basketball training or something, and all of that went
Wild.
down, and we had to wait, and it's like right next to the palace, next to the train tracks, and
That's
everything went
wild.
down. We're just sitting there like, okay, so when is this over? And you're just hearing all the
Right.
violence and the nonsense, and I was like, what the hell is this?
Well, I remember
But it was very bloody, the
the
streets afterwards.
biggest maybe the most significant uprising was in 2013, and
Was
they
it?
yeah
Yeah, yeah,
2013 was one of the big uprisings, and people took notice because of how violently it was dealt with,
yeah.
right? The fact that it was high school kids who were out protesting and they were gunned down in the street in broad daylight. Like that was the thing that sort of, I mean, it was stopped, right? But it made people think that okay, that's enough of that, right?
Enough is enough.
So anyway, December 2018 is when our revolution started. 2019 is when April of 2019 is when Bashir was finally removed from power
Mm-hmm.
and replaced with Al Burhan and this whole like
Transitional government
right a transitional council
council.
that eventually through negotiations becomes a transitional government.
So for those who don't know, in places where democracy is not really a thing, like they can't really host. It's kind of like the last. Yeah, let's just be real. Democracy is not
This is
really a
where
thing.
yeah, no,
Democracy is not
facts,
really a thing.
facts.
The transitional government would kind of take. It's a council that's sort of set up and just waiting to see who takes over the country next. It could be
It
through
sets
internal voting,
yeah,
could be
it
through
sets
a little
things
more
up.
strong armed, but
It sets things up for elections.
yeah,
It like
fake
paves
election.
the way for free and fair
Yeah,
elections.
sure, sure.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen in Sudan's case because
It's usually like a 2-year process, isn't
it
it?
was supposed to be 2 years, then extended to 4 years, then
Here we are,
right, then here we are,
2023.
2023 in April. Ironically, you had April 2019 is when Bashir was removed, and April 2023 when the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, and the military, who were during this transitional period, were partners in ruling the country.
Sure.
I mean, they took over. they essentially took over. But then now they're against each other. Now they're each fighting for something. God knows what.
It's this reminds me of this reminds me of, and again, probably weird comparison, but this reminds me of like a Justice League movie where at the end of it they say there's not going to be a prize.
Right.
There's not going to be a prize. There'll be no prize. There'll be no
Really.
glorious victor. And I think about this. I'm like, what are you guys fighting for? Like, after all this is over, you're going to sit there, like, stand up on TV, be like, we won, and look at basically a destroyed city.
That's
So
really
it's just, what are you looking for here? What is the end of it? I don't know.
that's really what it
Maybe,
is.
maybe there's some sort of behind the scenes promise. I don't know. But
I mean, I have
it is what it
a
is.
whole bunch of conspiracy theories
Name one.
on
Give me.
why
What's your most
this
prominent
is
one?
happening. That they're both in on it.
They're
It
both in.
makes
They're doing this on purpose.
They're doing it on purpose.
For what?
Because a lot of the stuff that's happening doesn't make sense. So for a long time we didn't know who started it, right? People just woke up on April 15th and found them fighting. That's literally
Sara, we're talking about Rujal Sudaniya from like born in like the 50s.
but
Like
that's
nothing they do makes sense.
I mean nothing they do
There's
makes
a
sense.
generation that whatever they do just doesn't make
That's
sense.
true. But there are certain things about this conflict that are so bizarre. For example, I mean, just to give some, like, an overview of how it's been for the last 4 months. They're fighting on a daily basis. The fighting started in the capital, Khartoum, which has never really happened. I mean, there's never been
They
an
bombed the airport. That was first thing.
right.
You hear the
That's
airport is bombed.
we've never seen violence of this scale in Khartoum for all the reasons I mentioned, right? The government lives here. This is the capital city. It's where everything is centralized. The government doesn't have any advantage to destroying this city, right? Eventually, the conflict spreads to other parts of the country, different cities across the country. But right now, it is concentrated in Khartoum over the last 4 months and in the west in Darfur, making, like, basically resurging the Darfur conflict once again. What doesn't make sense is that these people are not fighting to protect anybody. I mean, both sides are saying we're here to protect you guys, right?
From who?
We're
Everything was
here
fine
to
yesterday.
here to protect you from them, and the RSF is like we're here to protect you from them, but also we're here to bring democracy because there is no real democracy in Sudan, but we're the ones to bring it. But
Yep.
they're actively attacking civilians, right?
It doesn't. It 100% doesn't make sense.
It
I'm with
doesn't
you
make
there.
any sense, and the military from day one started bombing the city from the air. Who does that? Who, like, annihilates civilians under the guise of, well, let
Poor
me
military
bomb from the
leaders.
no,
Like you
no,
don't know what you're doing.
basically it's either you don't know what you're doing criminally, like you criminally don't know what
I
you're
feel like
doing,
I feel like that makes a lot more sense.
or you're doing it on purpose.
I'll give you my theory. My theory is that there's some sort of, obviously, natural Sudan is natural resource heavy, right?
Yes.
Um, they did that with the South, especially like we had a good chunk of our oil was in the South. Also,
Right.
there was then I don't essentially international community divided Sudan, and then we split from North Sudan to South Sudan.
Right.
I feel like there is external influence from other countries, some sort
I
of
mean,
promise to
yes.
whoever is on top, and they're stupid and decide to scramble over it.
Yeah, I agree with you about the external influence. There are a lot of different powers who have a vested interest in whatever happens in Sudan. You have the Europe who
America, excuse me. Oh, oh, good lord.
you have, like,
Oof.
European powers who are using the RSF as their own, like, migration force, right? Anti-migration force. You have different powers in the Middle East, especially the Gulf countries, that, like, use Sudan for farming and all sorts of other things. Like, yes, I agree, but there's also a version of this or an aspect to this that's just like, do you hate us?
It's
Is
so
that what it
It's
is?
so
Like,
crazy. Nothing logical comes out
do
of.
you hate Sudanese people? Like, do you hate your own people to the extent where you are okay with our mass murder? I mean, think about what's happening in Khartoum right now. How the RSF is going door to door, robbing people, like looting homes, killing people who don't want to leave their homes, telling people to leave their neighborhoods. My whole neighborhood was evacuated. I don't mean evacuated as in the military came and says, "Hey guys, we need to keep you safe, so you need to get out of here."
No, it's like
No,
get the f
the
out.
RSF came in and said, "Get out,"
I have friends whose house has been
and
burned.
folks had to leave. Like, I saw a video of my neighbors leaving barefoot. They were crossing the bridge to a
Same here.
different city, like, with just the clothes on their back.
So, guys, just so we can go through, we're just gonna go through and just really recap. Um, what has happened from like day one. So day one, from now we're in the conflict, right? First
Yeah.
day, airport gets bombed. Airport
Airport
gets
gets
bombed.
bombed.
No flights in and out. Everything's canceled.
Right.
Where were you in sort of state of mind? Because I think I was just waking up like for work, and I'm just waking up to hella WhatsApp messages.
You know, I
My family's there. My dad was stuck outside the country. You know, he had left. He had traveled like 3 days, leaving my mom and my sister essentially by themselves at home.
wow.
Yeah.
I was I saw the news of the airport getting bombed and I was like, yeah, no. That's
We never believe anything coming out of
I
Sudan.
really don't. I really don't.
We're
My
like,
first instinct is to say no. And then like wait on it.
remember when that bunker blew up? That bunker caught fire. We were
That's
living like Street 21, like right on Airport Road,
that's wild.
and nobody believed it for a while. Like we would see smoke and everything, and
Just
you
like
see smoke, you're hearing explosions. Nobody believed it. Sadly, I think one of our neighbors, like a shell, like fell into their house and like they died.
oh, that's awful.
It was terrible. I think. But again, in that time, nobody believed it until it was. You could see it with your eyes, and they were like, whatever."
I didn't believe it. And then the more news came out and people saying that they were trapped in their homes and then video coming out of the airport and people being trapped in the airport as you can hear like
Getting
bombs
kicked
go
off of planes that
yeah,
are
like
active on the runway.
that's when I was like, oh wait. But
Nah, this is it.
what is this? And so that continues for a week. For a week people were just trapped. I think after a week is when people started leaving the city, leaving Khartoum, right?
Was it a week? Was it like a week?
I feel like
I feel like it was 2
feel like
weeks.
the biggest wave was started a week into the conflict. I mean, that's when it started becoming like mass
Because I think it was like
mass
Because
displacement.
I think maybe it was like 2 weeks in when my family started leaving.
I know people who left 3 days in.
Smart. Well, I want to say smart, but
It
depends where
is
they depends where they were.
it is smart because the first wave of people who left here I'm talking about the capital Khartoum. That's
Mhm.
where my family is, so that's what the first wave of people who left went to Egypt and they were able to get in pretty quickly. They were able to leave from Khartoum to get to the border, the Egyptian border, and then get into Egypt pretty quickly.
That was like on the third week or something when people started leaving. At
And
least that's when
right,
my family
then
started. It was like the
exactly
third week
the
when.
beginning of the second and third week is when people start to leave in like the
Yeah.
thousands, and that's when you had people stuck at the border. That's when you had people.
My parents got lucky. Well, my mother and my sister got lucky. They left
Yeah.
relatively early in the migration, so they only got stuck like one night.
Right, there are people who are there. I know people who are still there. I have cousins who like half the family got in and the other half is still waiting. And that's when you start to see like just how grimy people are towards Sudanese people, just to keep it a buck. Like the fact that people were fleeing for their lives and at the border it was like, well, do you have a visa? Well, actually you need to pay
It's
to get
like
in.
I've heard that. I've heard like, oh, you need to get your passport from I knew people who were in the
Yeah.
process of like applying
Do you
to
have
visas,
do
so
you
their
have a
passports were in
passport?
whatever embassy of the country they were applying
Yeah.
to, and they're like, well, you need to call them and get it back. I said, how, bro? They've been evacuated. It wasn't open before. Now it's definitely not open. Everybody's gone.
Embassy employees left, especially foreign employees were evacuated very early.
I want to tell you the story of the French embassy. That's because my mom and my sister have dual citizenship. So
Did-
I'll tell you the story. It is hilarious. But just for the American audience, I want to just maybe help you guys conceptualize what this is like. So if you're, especially from Arizona, we have what Phoenix, the main city, and then you have Chandler, Tempe, Scottsdale, Glendale, all of that. Imagine you wake up one day, Sky Harbor is bombed. You're hearing on the
Yeah.
news, and Khartoum, essentially, like the airport is relative to kind of like Phoenix in terms of like very close to the center of everything.
Yeah.
Kind of like here, and you have the cities, like the main cities surrounding it, right? And your family is now traveling. They're telling you, oh, Scottsdale is being bombed and taken over. Tempe's all messed up. People, there are tanks going around the street, like up and down Rural and Mill Avenue and stuff. Like, try to conceptualize whatever street you're in. This is what we're not talking about. Like, Darfur definitely is a big state, but it's very far away from like the huge populations
But
compared
also
to. But just try to make it a little more real for you people like sitting here at
yeah,
home.
but also imagine that like there are also people shooting actively at you.
Mhm.
You're unarmed, you're running for your life, and somebody's gunning you down. There are snipers all over the buildings.
Well, I live in Glendale. I hear gunshots like on it. It is what it is,
It's just it. it's like complete
It's
pandemonium.
absolutely wild.
And then also you have to worry about getting your, I think the problem with making this understandable or comprehensible to, for
The
example,
non-Sudanese,
Americans, yeah, is that as Americans we don't really think about visas. We don't think about,
yeah, limited transport.
yeah, like if I want to go somewhere
You just go.
internationally, I just go, right? Even if I were to apply for a visa, it would take what, maximum
It would take
a
an
couple,
hour online. You just fill
if
out
not
paperwork and you
right,
print it.
if
Like
not a
certain
couple of,
places, you
if
just
like,
print it.
if we're being wild with it, it's like a couple of days. But imagine in a Sudanese person's perspective having to give your passport to an embassy and waiting 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks to receive any kind of response, right? And then a war breaks out and the embassy's like,
Deuces.
deuces, right?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, gotta get out of here. And then your stuff is just stuck in there.
So the embassy story. When my mother and my sister were getting ready to leave, so I had sort of just gone online. I told my mother, scan all your paperwork and send that shit to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like send me. I need
Smart.
copies of everything in case you guys get stuck somewhere or don't have access to it, you lose it. And they were trying to reach out to the French embassy and sort of figure out like when there's an evacuation plan and everything. This was a situation where I'm so glad I was wrong because it definitely, I want to say, I could confidently say, could have saved, my sister and my mother's life. My mom and my sister had lost confidence in the French embassy,
Mm.
right? They're like, they keep saying they're coming, they keep saying they're coming, stay on standby, we don't hear anything. So a friend of a very close family friend was like, hey, we're putting together a little convoy, renting out a bus, splitting all that, getting in, and then we're gonna go. We're gonna drive to Egypt. We have everything
And
set
that's
up,
real. A lot of people did that. A lot of people, yeah.
and they did. And I got mad. I'm like, why are you doing this? It's much safer with the French embassy and all of that. I again was wrong. The same day, my mom calls me and is like, hey, the French embassy reached out, and she was like, I don't know if we're gonna go with them. And I'm like screaming on the phone. I said, just go, just go, just go. Eventually, they don't go,
Mm-hmm.
and I was livid. My sister turns on her what's it called, location, and that's the only way I can track their progress. Like they
Right.
barely have any connection. The little
Right.
connection they do have, just ping a little location on iMessage. I find out like like maybe the next day, a day into their travel, I found out that the French embassy van that was supposed to have picked them up, like the convoy, they got shot at, and somebody got shot in the van,
Oh my
in like part of
God.
the convoy, like in the vehicle. And I was like, that could have been my mom. That could have been my sister.
That's
I don't know if they
wild.
died. I don't think they died, but they definitely got shot. Like that was one thing. And I was like, man, I have never been so wrong and so glad to be wrong. And this is like, there's no security anywhere you'd go.
Yeah.
Like anywhere is a lose. After that, I just calmed down. I said, whatever they want to do, whatever makes them feel comfortable in their
Right.
decisions, just let them do it because it's a
Well,
lose
I
lose
mean,
situation in
yeah.
any way.
That was the thing. Like, even people who had dual citizenship and were getting evacuated by their embassies, the embassies would say, you need to meet us at this place.
Mm-hmm.
We can't come get you. And so either way, you're facing incredible risk to
Yeah.
try to get to anywhere, right? My family, I don't have any family who, like, any relatives who have dual citizenship. So everybody just had to make a way for themselves and get out of Khartoum, try to go to a different city, whatever. And I have, my cousin has like a really big family, right? And they were stuck in one of the hot spots, like huge conflict zone. Basically, it was their building in the middle of an RSF like territory.
Mm-hmm.
The people who lived with them in the building all left. It was just them stuck in their apartment. RSF had taken over the building. They're shooting. They're bombing from the air. The military is bombing from the air. They were stuck in there for maybe about, I want to say, 40 or 50 days in their home. And when it came time to leave,
That's madness.
my cousin decided, we're just gonna take our stuff. We're gonna take our furniture. We're gonna take everything. We're gonna get in a truck and we're gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
And a trip from Khartoum to Medani, which should take maybe 3 hours if you're going slow, took them 12 hours,
Jeez.
right? Because they don't want to attract any attention to themselves. They don't want to, make any fuss at any of the There are these checkpoints all over the highways, not just the military, but also the RSF.
Mm-hmm.
And the RSF is looking into the cars and being like,
What do you guys got?
yeah. And my cousin, her oldest is a teenager, and there were rumors that the RSF is forcibly recruiting boys to fight with them.
Oh, that did start actually like a month in or something
Yeah,
like that.
and so my cousin is just freaking out that like she doesn't want to do anything that will attract attention to her son, right? So anyway, eventually they make it safely to Medini after 12 and a half hours, maybe 13 hours of driving. And everybody is traumatized. Imagine being in 40 and 50 days of constant bombing. And then, in order to flee for your life, you have to organize all of that. You have to find the transportation. You have to go through these checkpoints. You have to sometimes pay. Sometimes people were robbed. Their stuff was taken. Some people, like I have relatives whose cars were taken at checkpoints, so they were just stuck in the middle of
And you're
nowhere.
like waiting for somebody nice enough to let you hop on.
Or walk.
Or
right?
walk, yeah.
Because
You walk until somebody nice enough lets you to hop on.
right, like the stories coming out of Khartoum, and I mean, we're talking about the capital city because our families are there.
Mm-hmm.
So all of our information is from
based
there.
on the Khartoum experience.
Right, but that's not where this is happening in all of the other cities where fighting is happening, and worse.
Well, actually, I want to say one of the cities where I was very surprised, and my cousin fled there. He went south to El Gadarif, which is close to the Ethiopian border.
Yeah.
And when I looked it up, what was going on, he was sending me pictures. It's like, this is a paradise. I said, Gadarif is going to be the last paradise left. Let's knock on wood or whatever. Let's not jinx it. But Gadarif is going to be the last paradise in Sudan at this point, because I don't know why. I don't know, and I'm happy nothing's happening down there. But I feel like there were other people were really talking about leaving rather than advertising, or sorry, not advertising. What's the proper word? I'll stick with advertising. Sorry, my brain is fried.
No problem.
Advertising is just the safe places within Sudan for those who can't travel, and I feel like that was a lost opportunity, because everyone was saying go to Port Sudan, go to Medini, go to what's it called, the Egyptian border, all that. But just a reminder, guys, this is Sara's family's experience is largely the experience of everybody. My family. I can't tell you. My cousins went back. My cousins lived in England. They came back to Sudan. Him and his sister. He hasn't. My older cousin hasn't been back to Sudan in years. Came back a week in.
Oh no!
Everything hell.
That's awful.
She was just. I'm glad I was able to just talk to her on the phone and keep her calm. But imagine what they're going through. Their neighbor house is bombed. They're passing resources through the walls. Like, you got to just shout at your neighbor, like, hey, you got anything you could spare? Water's out, electricity's out.
And I think
that's you're just hearing gunshots and bombs. Like, you're calling like, hi, auntie, hey, cuz. And you're just hearing and you're just sleeping on the ground. I feel for these people, because that trauma will does come out later on.
It doesn't. I don't think it. Yeah, it
whether you're here or there,
doesn't go away easily. And I think that's one of the things that's why I'm so sad that there isn't coverage, or the coverage that you see on the media about what's going on in Sudan is like, it's like the recaps I do.
Okay.
Oh, there's fighting here and there's fighting there, and there was a negotiation, but it fell through, and then whatever. But it's very rare to get coverage of like the real impact on people, like people's actual experience, because first of all, it's hard to comprehend, but I think if you don't hear about it, then you think that this is just a normal thing, like or
like,
people consider they're like, oh, this is just another African country being
in turmoil,
an African country, right? So
look at them savages beefing all day there.
Exactly.
Like, it's easy for the Western world to be like, well, it's just another story.
And that's real. Like, even if you think about the difference in how people, reacted to what's going on in Sudan and what happened in Ukraine, right? Like, this idea that, like, I mean, on the news it was like, but they're just like us. Like, they drive cars like us and they have whatever like us. How could this be happening to them? This was...
I lost support for the Ukrainian people when they went to England and were complaining about, like, the neighborhoods they're in and all the color. And I was like, guys, England hasn't been white for years. Like, you seen their parliament? It's There's not a single British person in there.
Your
Okay, the
podcast
colonies have
is
taken.
about to
This is
get
reverse.
dragged.
Yeah, this is
Your
reverse colonization. They have taken the Indians and Pakistanis have taken over, and I'm all for it.
your podcast is about to get dragged.
Yeah, yeah. Oh well,
Because
let them get
they
dragged. I
really
lost
don't
all
want to hear
support. I'm like,
that.
how are you people? How are you people oppressed and not humble, ungrateful, still racist
But that's the
within your? Like I
thing.
said, I could care less. Sudanese people, like I want to just give a shout out to the solidarity of Sudanese people and their generosity, like throughout this whole process. Like you said, the coverage has mainly been internal. The coverage I followed was the Twitter Spaces. I think have been the biggest for me because I got kept in track. I was telling my family information.
That's what
Like
I'm
I was telling
saying.
my aunts in like Khartoum too, which is a kind of like a smaller subsection of like in the residential like area in the city. I was telling them what's going on right
Yeah.
now. Like I was telling people in Bahri, I'm like, hey mom, you need to call such and such. Let them know because I heard this and this is going on in this neighborhood. Like the solidarity of the Sudanese people and how they're able to really keep each other's spirits up. Like I never heard crying on that. Like it was all very encouraging. So yeah, shout out to the Sudanese people for just really just taking control, not being victims. Like, you know what? We're not going to wait for you guys to give us coverage on our own country. We're going to figure this out.
Right. And that's why I talk about the coverage, because I think when the thing in whatever the stuff in Ukraine popped off, because of the coverage, you saw like all of this outpouring of support. You had people donating, you had people flying over there to be at the Polish border and volunteer and do all this kind of stuff. But in the Sudanese context, we're doing all of this by ourselves.
Yeah, it won't be my
People
money. It won't be my money.
people immediately jump to help our own because we know that nobody's coming to save us,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of the uproar on Twitter and all of the hashtags and all of the coverage, even the coverage that we saw on international media, did very little, if anything, to get us the kind of support that we needed. And so what do we do in the alternative? We have to just do it
Yeah,
ourselves.
it's just
So
one of the,
people
it's a very
started
it's the story of oppressed of the
people
oppressed people.
facts,
Like, you know what? I'm not going to wait for you. I'm not going to wait for your charity. We're just going to figure it out, right?
real talk.
You know,
And
and just
even
to bring it
now,
back to bring it back to the context on Lost in the Desert. This just again, I told Assam this when when it first came out. I said, my guy, we now have something really really in common that we can both relate to because the Palestinian people have been doing this for years, and
right,
let's not act like people have not even people didn't just give up on the Palestinians. People
right,
actually turned against them. They're like,
right,
whatever,
yeah,
bro, not our issue. Now you guys are the bad guys. I'm like, bro, we got nothing.
right.
How are we oppressing you? We have nothing to oppress you. And this is sort of, now I fear and I hope, no offense, but like we're not trying to get to that point because I feel like Sudanese, there's still hope. We're still in that early
Yeah.
stage where there's still
Yeah.
hope. And the only because this is an internal conflict, like this is Sudanese versus Sudanese, the only people standing in our way are other Sudanese. So the only thing is at this point is we can figure out like when I say other Sudanese, I mean like paramilitary Sudan versus
Okay. Yeah.
them.
I was about
No,
to
no,
be
no, no,
like,
no, 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 no,
okay.
no, no, no. The Sudanese
Okay.
people, just to clarify, the Sudanese people are all united against this. It's the paramilitary. That's what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The
I mean, I
Palestinians
think,
have the whole Israeli thing.
yeah, I
They're
think that's
against
the
them. It's
sad
two
part.
separate groups.
The
This
sad
we're
part
all
of,
one group. We have to just get united at some
yeah.
point, and this our only hope is to figure out like, hey, when and how will the paramilitary and the RSF, sorry, the paramilitary and the military, um, sort of unite, get a
Well, I
common
mean,
goal
I think
to end this.
that's the irony. I think during the revolution, people were, I mean, one of the slogans, right? One of the things that people were actively protesting was the existence of this paramilitary in the first place. The fact that we don't believe that there should be two separate militaries in one country. That either you guys merge into one, which should have been, right? That was basically one of the agreements that they made, or you disband it. Right? Why do we need two separate militaries? And so now that this is happening, and for the 4 years that people, even within that transitional period, when people were still protesting the existence of the RSF, and the military, Sudanese military, was telling those protesters, "Oh no, you have no right to protest this because they're a part of us and whatever, and we're one big happy family." Now that they're fighting against each other, now all of a sudden, oh, the RSF is a terrorist organization, and it's like, well, we've been telling you that for 4 years, and you've been gunning us down in the streets
Yeah.
for it. Like, well, which one is it, right? But I think that's the sad part about what's happening in Sudan right now is that it's like you said, it's us doing it to ourselves, right? At some level, this is Sudanese people destroying the country that they should be building.
Mm-hmm. Like we had a
Unfortunately, we have a
choice,
yeah, we
we
have a
had a
long
chance, and we didn't
right,
blow it. Like the Sudanese people
right,
didn't blow it.
exactly, yeah.
Like it only takes 5 people to, you know, a handful of people in a country with, you know, tens of millions to really screw things over.
And we have a long history of the Sudanese people like paying for the crimes of their governments, right? The
Mm-hmm.
sanctions that the U.S. placed on Sudan for 30 years um, were the result of the actions of al-Bashir and his government that had nothing to do with the Sudanese people, but we bore the brunt. We couldn't travel, we couldn't get economic opportunities, we couldn't study, we couldn't get scholarships, we can't get technology. Like all of these things that people take for granted are things that we've had to circumvent for 3 decades, right?
Oh, yeah.
And now we had this small window of opportunity for us to be able to get out of that, right? The world is finally looking at Sudan like, okay, you're no
You're
longer
valuable.
right. You're no longer the axis of evil, which is what we were called.
I
Again,
don't think we
like,
were ever the axis of
oh,
evil. I
we were
feel like
definitely
we were,
part of the axis of
but
evil,
well, I
according
not
to the
in
American
according
government.
to the American government,
Yeah.
but realistically, I just feel like we were. I
No,
feel like we had resources and weren't trying to share and play ball.
we had nothing. We had
Really?
nothing. No, I'm saying nothing that would place us on this axis of evil level. Like we,
You don't think that we had enough resources for external influence to be like, let's try to destabilize and take over, whether it's
listen.
oil, whether it's I
I
found it
don't
weird. I
know.
just learned like
I feel
Coca-Cola is
like,
stressing because of us, and
well,
that's
yeah, that's because of
because of
the
the gum
gum
Arabic.
Arabic. Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't know like that was such a big deal. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
shit,
because we export. We have 90, maybe 80 or 90% of the world's.
80 or 90
Yeah,
of the
I think it's
world.
80% of the world's gum
Coca-Cola, it's about
Arabic
time to start lobbying.
comes out of Sudan.
I'm not paying more
But
for
think, but
for
but
Coke.
listen,
This is
but
crazy.
listen to this. We have
90%?
80 or 90% of the world's gum Arabic stock. We export 80 or 90% to the world, right? That
What do we
exists
keep?
in Sudan. But what are we getting out of it? Literally there were headlines in the first couple of months that were like the soda industry is in turmoil because the
Sudan
gum Arabic
conflict.
gum Arabic supplies are in jeopardy because of the war in Sudan. And it's like we have this much power and yet we are like one of the poorest countries in the world. That doesn't
Over an
make
industry
any
that,
sense.
and let's be honest, the drink industry, like the soda drink, the pop drink industry, whatever you want to call it, is like what, 3 4 companies like that run like 80% of it.
And that
It's
was
kind of like candy. It's like Mars runs like 90% of the candy
but
company.
also that's newsworthy. Our lives, being gunned down. The
Yeah, like
oil is not,
over
but
fucking Pepsi,
but
like
Pepsi's like,
Pepsi
oh
and
wait, hold
Coke.
on, let's look at what's happening over there, because whatever.
Guys, just go knock like Biden. This is affecting our share. I need you to, like, we can't afford to sell Coke at, you know, $5 a bottle
It's
because of this. You
sad.
need to end the conflict in Sudan. Like, this is how
It's
weird. This is how capitalism and like really international politics works. Like, you have something somebody wants, somebody lobbies against it, destabilization starts. Usually sanctions,
yeah,
right? Usually starts with
and that's the
sanctions.
thing. But sanctions don't even do anything.
Yeah, they don't 100%
Like
because
I
listen, they
said,
did it for Bashir and didn't mean shit to him.
and those
And 30 years
people,
later,
the
homeboy
people
was
who
still
have
there.
power can very easily get around those sanctions. A lot of them are dual citizens, so it doesn't even matter. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just the people who who are most desperately in need for whatever are the ones who are limited by those sanctions.
I
Like I
mean,
said, I have friends who, couldn't get ahead in their careers because there are certain certificates that they need to
they can't get.
that they can't get because of US sanctions on Sudan. What does that have to do with the government? Nothing.
What does that have to do with me? So and let's not act like Sudanese people are not highly educated. Like they want to. It's kind of like the whole Africans are not like, oh, they're not educated. We all live in
Right.
huts and stuff. It's like, yo, there's like 5 of them like that, and it's all like specific
And,
tribes.
and that's the thing,
Sudanese
like,
people are highly educated. You have hella like engineering, dentistry, like medicine. Those are huge fields the Sudanese people come
yeah.
from.
And even if we weren't,
Even if we weren't, why? Yeah.
Why are we not?
But I
Like,
just want to like move that stigma that we're not valuable to the world.
no, but
Like,
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying even if we weren't, I
we're
mean,
still
we are a
human.
highly educated nation, but even if we weren't, we wouldn't be because of all the limitations placed on us that for things that are outside of our control. When you support a military government, when you support the rapid support forces and you give them $30 million like the EU did to act like border control so that African migrants don't come into Europe,
Oh,
you are participating in our oppression. right? And then you say, oh well, these people are, live in political strife and whatever, they can't be trusted, so we got to put all these constrictions on them.
Can't be trusted with what? Just to live? They just want to breathe, bro. Put
you're
them in a.
you're doing it though. You're actively
You're causing that.
contributing to it. Exactly, you're causing it to keep persisting.
I feel
And
like
so
if they invested that money in just sort of aid, and when I
development,
say aid, not like sending them packets of food like the UN does,
if
okay,
they
you can
just
feed them, but that's not the end of the problem. That's not going to feel the end game. Like if you worked on actual honest development of those nations instead of pillaging them for resources,
right.
right? The migrant issue, people don't, not all, newsflash guys, not all immigrants and migrants want to be there, right? Like some of them,
And
they
that's,
want to be in their home countries,
yeah,
but are forced. That's kind of part of the problem.
it's
Like
like,
wealthy people, like wealthy migrants want to be there.
to
Poor
me,
migrants want to be home. And
it's
if you
keep the
guys
money.
didn't pillage their country of resources and destabilize, they wouldn't be in your borders.
To me, it's keep the money and take away the constrictions and see what
Yep.
happens.
See what happens.
See what happens when people are able to have access to knowledge, technology, and opportunities. See what they do in their own countries. They won't need you, but you need them
But
to
that's the
need
problem.
you. Right.
You need them to need you. And I was gonna say, they have the access to knowledge. They have the resources to do something with it. They don't.
Even the access to knowledge they have, the what they have is out of their own ingenuity.
Yep.
And not because it is afforded to them like it
Exactly.
is to the rest of the world.
What's the point of an engineering degree if you don't have the tools to use it?
Right.
Like that's basically Sudan. Like you have all of these highly educated people
right.
with no resources, no tools,
Brilliant
like all these
minds with no access.
exactly brilliant minds. Like you have all these doctors and limited hospitals. Like where do you want them to do?
Right.
But
But here's the kicker: when Sudanese doctors go elsewhere, because they're used to working under such like dire
life is easy.
circumstances, it's so easy. They excel because they know so many things that doctors who are used to having everything afforded
handed
to them.
They're like,
Right.
Well, let's bring it back just to give shout outs. So, are there any people, any resources, any people who are still currently resources for people who are to diaspora to help family back home, people who are there, people who aren't able? Do you know of any resources? Anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I really want to mention. Earlier, we talked about how, Sudanese people have had to save themselves essentially in the absence of any sort of international support or any significant international support. And one of the ways, I mean, there are so many ways that Sudanese people have rallied to help each other, both internally and from outside. One of the ways is the formation of what are called emergency response teams. And they're essentially just neighborhood committees, young people who have come together to provide medicine, food, water, all of the needs of their communities for the people who are still trapped in these, in cities where fighting is happening.
Okay.
You also have initiatives that people in the diaspora have created to sort of fund what's happening on the ground, right? One such initiative is Home Tax Sudan. It's a group called Home Tax Sudan, which basically in the beginning, what they were doing was collecting money to directly help people who were trying to leave, or people who needed food, had run out of money or resources, or people who were trapped in their homes by themselves, the elderly. They were collecting donations to then send to those people directly. So basically directly helping families and individuals in need. Eventually, Home Tax Sudan grew to support initiatives, and the main initiative right now that they're supporting is called Save a Janena, which is a group that is helping refugees in Chad. So we touched on it a little bit, the fact that this conflict is also taking place in West Sudan and Darfur. And a big percentage of people from West Darfur have had to flee into Chad, which is on the border between Sudan, on the border with Darfur, right?
And Central Africa, I think.
Chad is
next to Central, like between
borders
in Central Africa. Because I've been there, and Central Africa's hell.
Right. So the people who have fled into Eastern Chad are, they went in there and there's nothing. There are no organizations. There's very little international support. The Chadian government is also dealing with very meager resources,
conflicts.
right, and their own situation. So this Save a Janina initiative is helping people to build housing for them. Right now, I think their first and main um, project was to build clinics because again, this is happening, and there's like this backdrop, this environmental backdrop. We talking about Hurricane Hillary here in
I'm like,
in the U.S.,
okay.
but in Sudan you have the rainy season, which is getting worse and worse each year because of climate change, and the rainy season hitting and floods hitting when people have literally they're sitting just out in the open. So people are stuck being exposed to the elements. Save Guinea is doing things to help people get
They're through that.
medical care, but also yeah to get them
Okay.
situated while this thing plays itself out.
Mm.
Yeah, so Home Techs Sudan are doing amazing. Save Janana is doing amazing, and these are initiatives that people can actually donate to.
Got you.
There's also organizations like SAPA, which is the Sudanese American Professionals Association or Physicians Association.
Okay.
Don't quote me on the name, child, but they SAPA is
We'll put the links. We'll put the
yeah.
links in
You put the links
when we put it in when we release the show. But
right, but they've been. I mean, they're. I think it is Physicians Association because they're doctors. They've been collecting donations and also doing a lot of work. Not just. I mean, they're doing work on in the refugee camps on the Chadian border. They're also doing work in different parts of Sudan, including Khartoum, helping hospitals by getting them supplies, medical supplies, emergency supplies, whatever.
Mhm.
So they've been doing excellent work. They are also accepting donations, so people can look them
Do
up
stuff.
and see what kind of work they're doing. But the problem, I think, when we think about donating in the American Western perspective, we're thinking about vetted, huge organizations. We're thinking about the UN, or we're thinking about, organizations here in America that might have big names, recognizable names, right?
Right.
In Sudan, we don't have that kind of infrastructure. I mean, you have the UN doing work. You have organizations like Doctors Without Borders, which is doing amazing work. You have the Norwegian Council that's doing incredible work.
Oh yeah, I've heard the Norwegian
They're
Council.
doing
They're
such amazing work
right.
in this, including in mental health, which is
The
something that
Scandinavians are
people
just great people in general.
listen.
Except for the Swedes, they screw us over with IKEA.
I won't get into that,
Nah,
but
I've lost hella money on that.
but in Sudan, the people who are doing the work are by and large uh, groups that have come together on their own. They're small
Mhm.
initiatives, they're
It starts as
volunteer
people.
initiatives, right? They're grassroots organizations. They don't have governmental backing because of all the things we talked about. The fact that the government doesn't give two shits about us. Like it's people for people, right? It's the people doing it for themselves. And so when you have companies that I was just talking to somebody the other day who was saying, "Oh, my company wants to donate to an organization in Sudan that's working on the ground. Who can we donate to?" And I'm like, well, because I know that these big companies don't want to donate to small groups. They don't want to donate to an emergency response team because they don't see them as legitimate,
It's not just legitimate. It's also not marketable.
and it's not
Right.
marketable.
Like
But
I work
those are
in
the people who are doing the work in Sudan.
I believe that's the industry like I work in, and I know for a fact like 90% of these companies are full of crap. Like when it
Well,
comes to donation, it's either taxes, it's
right
either brand recognition,
now,
like either
yeah.
leading up to a new product they're releasing or
I
something
mean,
like
yeah.
that.
Let's
Like
not kid ourselves. They're
it's
not
yeah, let's
doing it
not kid
out of
ourselves. Believe me, hey, still keep donating. Like I'm not, whatever, however we get to the pot of gold,
however we get
because
the money,
somebody's
we
still
get it
benefiting from
right.
that. But don't it limits your. It also my issue with that is that it limits people donating to more efficient means. Like you
Yeah,
donate to the biggest names, but not necessarily the one that's doing the most or the one in
right,
need.
right.
So
That's
yeah, keep
that's
donating,
definitely
but
yeah.
I definitely will continue giving you guys a
I
side
mean,
eye.
the ones that these initiatives, these big initiatives that I've talked about, these big groups that I've talked about, are really helping to support people on the ground. But it's just sad to me that you know it's hard to understand the context of Sudan. It's complicated. People don't understand that over the last you know let's just say over the last 4 years since the revolution, the people. I mean the help, any development that's happened has happened because people willed it, right? Grassroots organizations, neighborhood committees, resistance committees have come together to do that work, the work that otherwise the government should be doing, and in any other place a government would be doing, is work that regular civilians are doing for themselves across Sudan.
Hmm.
And they're not getting the legitimacy and the recognition that they deserve. And unfortunately, foreign governments also don't recognize that kind of grassroots work. They don't
Like,
see it as being actual development work.
like they're throughout the whole process, there's literally neighborhoods of people. Like it's on from Twitter to WhatsApp groups, and it's just people
Yeah,
like, "Hey, who knows a doctor?" And the
literally.
responses come like this, and you'd be
Literally.
surprised. Like when I saw one was like, "Hey, who knows a doctor? I have a family member with like a broken leg, live on like the seventh floor. Shit is going around like down all the way downstairs. We need to get him out, get him to a hospital." And I think within like 2 hours,
Mhm.
homeboy was out, and I said, "How did they get to this? How did this like come out so
even
quick?"
the even the
Like,
evacuations that we were talking about earlier, when people were trying to evacuate to different cities or evacuate into Egypt, like there were groups that were just volunteering to organize that for people, to find transportation for them, to get them out safely, to look for people who are missing, like all of this stuff that we think of massive organizations or in the States thinking about, like the National Guard doing, right? Or the police doing, were things that just regular
people
folks,
do every single
yeah,
day, but
are
for
and
somehow
are
costs
continuing to do, and
costs people and taxpayers here like millions.
and
I'm like, why
even
do you need all this money? Like, I have 7 Sudanese people right now in some random neighborhood will get all this done.
in the beginning,
Like,
the
this is how
first
great like the
weeks,
Sudanese solidarity is.
yeah, when people, even when like foreign dignitaries were trying to get out, they were getting those volunteer groups to help them evacuate.
Yep.
Are you for real?
Is getting Ahmed and Saif and Murtada from the
Literally,
neighborhood.
literally.
Call up, get on WhatsApp. We need
Yeah,
X, Y, and Z. Like, we
can
need
you
these
help us?
resources. Like, yeah, the Sudanese solidarity is great.
It's a situation I think unlike any other that I've seen
I think it'll bring the country like
recently.
even stronger. And I told my sister this. I said, whenever this is done,
That's why it's so
whoever comes out
upsetting.
on top, they're going to get fried because
That's
they're going to be
why,
exhausted from fighting, resources,
right.
and mentally. And the Sudanese people are going to be pissed. Watch them run back from whatever
But
country they
also,
were in.
it's so that's why it's so upsetting that Sudan is where it is, because if you just think about how genius and how creative and how diligent people are, right? And
So
how
quickly.
determined they are. Like if you could maintain, if whole neighborhoods could maintain off of just volunteer work, imagine what they could do if they actually had the opportunity to build, right? This is just people trying to survive right now.
I think this is for the better. I think it's tough now, but I think this is means there's still so many people and supporters of a Bashir, and we're part of that regime and that mess that was created, who are still trying to. And
Oh yeah.
I think this whole process in the
I
long
mean, like
term
I
will
said,
weed
there's so
them
many
out.
conspiracies.
Yeah, I
There's
feel
so
like it'll
many
just weed them
conspiracies.
out. They'll tear themselves apart. All right. And
Hopefully.
hopefully now we have a next generation that's ready to really step up and motivated and fried. And we have
Yeah.
sadly, we do have a blank slate now that just needs to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
And it's reality.
Yeah.
There's Sudan right now, especially Khartoum, the main capital, is just sort of in ruins, and it's a blank slate ready to be rebuilt.
But I think the question now is, how do we get this to stop so that people may rebuild? You know what I mean? Like I
We
think,
talked about this briefly. It's just hypotheticals at this point.
yeah, at this point, I
Like,
mean at this point nobody
yeah,
knows.
nobody knows.
Yeah. I'm To me I think a lot of people are arguing, we need to they need to get on the negotiation table, right? This is not going to stop unless they negotiate with each other and try to come up to some deal to stop the fighting. A lot of people are also against that because it's like, well, you've done all of this damage,
None of you should
especially
be
like the
here
RSF,
anyway.
like none of you should be here, but specifically the Rapid Support Forces. We don't want to negotiate with these terrorists, these people who have terrorized the country for 5 months, who have looted, who have killed people in their homes, who have taken over their homes. My home is no longer mine. They
Our
actually
neighborhood is no longer. Our
live
neighborhood was
in
bombed
my
like
house
3 weeks
now,
ago.
right? Like, how do you negotiate with somebody who has done all this to you? Why would we allow them to have a seat at the table?
I don't know. We just need them to calm things down so
Right,
people get, like I said, however this ends or pauses,
right.
the Sudanese people are already rallied. They're already waiting. You just tell through the conversations,
Yeah.
and they're ready to tear up whoever's
Oh,
left.
absolutely. And that was the argument too. Like, we just
They're
need
probably
the
afraid now.
RSF.
They're like, we fucked up and we
We need
can't
the
stop.
RSF to be defeated. We can deal with the military later because we've dealt
Yeah,
with them before. I think that was one of the main arguments that people were making in the beginning.
probably because the military
Now,
has a little bit more self control. They have the RSF really
Assuming.
assumed a little bit more self
I don't
control.
know
Like
if I agree with
they have to
that,
save
but
face to a certain extent. The
right.
RSF not really.
I feel like that's what people think. To me personally, I think they're both
Oh, yeah, both.
shameless. I think they both will do whatever it
Well, we're
takes.
talking about the lesser of two evils. There's no,
Right.
nothing. There's no prize. Again, there's no prize.
Right. Exactly. There's no prize. Yeah.
It's very disappointing. I want to say this, and might be a little controversial. Like I remember when I went to the protest here that happened in Tempe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was concerning how we couldn't. They were told like not to. And shout out to. I won't bring any names. I don't want to drag you guys into this drama, but you all know who you are. Shout out to the ladies who basically ignored all that. There were people from like the Sudanese center here who were actively against like making chants against the RSF and against because they're like, oh, some people might be. We have some people that are like kind of in support. And we don't want to ruffle any feathers, and we don't want to ruffle
Oh
any feathers against the people who are
wow.
supporting Hemeti or Burhan. Like you couldn't mention their name in the protest, right? You just have to chant like
That's
no justice, no
wild.
peace. All of that. Like
That's
I lost my voice for a while, and I
wild.
said, screw this. I'm not going to keep doing this. But it was like it became very aggressive. They're like, oh, this is proper, like these microphones are property, you use them the way we want. I said, what the fuck is this? And I shout out to the girls who said fuck that, and they just
Right.
kept chanting.
Good for
And
them.
they called out Hemeti and Burhan by name. But
That's
it's very
insane to
disconcerting that there were
me.
Sudanese people, especially within the community here. This is why I don't go to that center. I don't got no time for that. So keep me away. I am Sudanese all by myself.
Yeah, I
But
listen.
it's very like, do we have do we have instances of that outside of here? Because this is that's the only space where I've seen any sort of support,
Um,
for either force. It's usually
I
just screw
can't.
both of you.
I can't. Well, I do think there are plenty of places where people are actively rooting for the military, and not just in terms of like they're the lesser of two evils, but like this.
Actively,
We're so proud, that it's like the
I can
military.
kind of get that,
I,
kinda
I get it on a
national pride level.
not even that. I get it on a desperate times call for desperate measures
Okay,
level.
that
But
too.
I think if people took a step back, it's hard to take a step back and look at things objectively. And I think it's hard to divorce emotion from what's going on right now. But I think if people just took a little step back, they would. We have such a problem with like this goldfish memory of as soon as something new happens, we forget
Forget
everything
the
else
back.
that happened before. We just got done protesting and dying to get rid of 30 years of military rule. Not for you to turn around and say, oh, our military is beyond reproach. Nope. We have to support them. If you support them, if you don't support them, then you're against them. That's wild to
Yeah,
me.
it was wild when I heard those chants.
It's
Like,
spitting in the face of everybody who died in the revolution and before the 30, 50 years before of military, brutal military rule. Like, at some point, we have to keep it real. We
yeah,
have to,
it
like,
is.
be realistic.
I
And
would
I
say
would,
maybe. Oh, sorry, go on.
yeah, no, I'm just going to say that, like, am I rooting against the Sudanese military winning? Absolutely not. Am I going to just like forgive all of its crimes because of
Yeah,
what's
no,
happening right now? No, they are part of the reason why we are where we are
they're
right
part
now.
of the problem. I'm definitely all
Right.
for the
I'm
lesser of
gonna
two
hold them
evils.
accountable.
I
Totally, yeah.
just want. I would rather. It would be easier. I feel like it would be easier for these Sudanese people to deal with the military than the RSF. Just because, again, like you said,
Yeah.
we've dealt with them
There
before.
right.
Right, they have
There
to
are
be
arguments to be made for
They're
that.
part of law, so there's a little bit of accountability they have to pretend to have. The RSF doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
I think it would just be easier to just have them deal with the RSF instead of the military instead of the
Military.
RSF.
I
So
mean,
that's the level of
I
support.
get
But
that perspective.
when they were telling us at the protest, because I had Mike and I was also like leading chants as well. We were rotating, and when they were
That's
just
wild
telling
to
them like,
me.
no,
That's so
you
ugly.
can't mention. I think somebody said uh, Burhan was Khan or something like
Right.
that, and they're like, no, we can't chat. There are people who might be in support or something. And I'm just like, my guy, go away.
Yeah,
It's like this
no.
old dude. I said, go away. I said, just tell them you're not going to. And then literally the girls were like, no, yeah, we're not going to do this, and turned around and then immediately continued the chat.
That is so wild to me.
Yeah, it was completely wild. Like,
I mean,
but
yeah, not
I want to
mentioning
say at least
Hemeti's name,
ending
that's
on a.
insane.
I want to like obviously we're running out of time. We still have a little bit of time, but I want to just Sudanese people are also the most hilarious to me because in
Listen,
that time, and I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about. In that time, the videos that came out of Sudanese people giving zero, shits at the time. How are you breaking fast during Ramadan in front of tanks and people like
wild.
their videos? This is how Sudanese people are so unserious, and I love them for it.
We're wild.
They're on in the middle of the street like, and this it's not just one video, it's like a very consistent thing. Like they will go outside to break fast
Even
on the
today.
mats eating and everything, and you're seeing gunshots and tanks going at it
Yeah.
like a street away, and they're just watching. They're like and I'm like,
Even today,
you guys are the shit. You guys are G's. You guys are
people
really
will
real. This is amazing.
put their
But also you
chairs
guys are
out.
unserious.
People will put their chairs out in front of their homes and watch it like it's a game. It's I'm like, is this survival? Like, are we just so
Desensitized.
yeah, are we so desensitized that
Like
like
this is
it really does not matter? It's wild. But also like the memes, the way that we've been handling this war
Mostly they're
with
coming from
the
inside Sudan.
darkest humor, that's literally coming from
Like America, like Sydney, the diaspora is not making these. The
absolutely not.
diaspora is laughing at
I'm
these and
crying.
circulating.
I'm like devastated, and people in Sudan are making like TikToks of just the funniest shit you could ever imagine. It's like, are y'all okay? Are we okay? Well, we're not okay.
You know
At
what?
some level, we're not. But I love that. I love that. I love that. Like
Like,
humor is our way to cope. You'll
and you know what?
yeah
We're getting both of it done. Like some people are making us laugh and just putting out the wins, and then
right.
other people are like, you know what? We're gonna deal with all this trauma. And so for the rest of y'all, keep putting out these videos like
I mean yeah.
homeboy dancing and celebrating. I think I saw a wedding once outside. Like I said, the
Yeah.
priorities.
Some of the things that have happened in this war have been so
Yeah, the
surreal.
videos that just come out, it was just crazy. It's like, you know what? I'm just
Wild.
gonna the ones that are people just praying in the middle of the street, like group prayers.
Yeah.
Beautiful to see. Like your dedication
Yeah.
to your religion is incredible because I promise you,
That I
I am not praying
understand.
in groups. You can still pray inside, right? Like this
Right.
group could have been inside.
Also that.
Yeah, this group could have been inside. You didn't need to be out here, and you're seeing like tanks fighting. You're seeing like just fly over like in the backgrounds of these like a lot of these like videos that people are like reporting out. Um, Beautiful to see, hilarious, but also just kind of shows. So these people are tough.
Oh yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Right?
That's we are if it's anything, we're resilient. If anything, we are a resilient people. And I want better for us, but I'm glad that we're somewhat able to hold on
And I really
in the
just
face of this.
just to the diaspora. I know because you're not in there. Some of y'all may not feel that your opinion, your voice really matters that much.
It does.
Yes, our voice is the one that the international community hears, and sadly, that's kind of our voice is the one white folk listen to. Sadly, so that's really it. It is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean I get it. I get that like this is a huge emotional burden. It's had a massive toll on us mentally, emotionally, but I don't know.
What
I
else we
don't want to
got?
tell people what to do,
I don't want to
but
tell people what I'm with you. I don't
yeah,
want to tell people what to do,
yeah,
but if you can do it,
right.
really think about like, can I really do this or do I not want to do this? Like, just think
Yes.
about that. I'm not going to shame you for not doing it, but
Yes.
take a pause. And more importantly, so you guys who left Sudan and made it out to Egypt, made it out to Saudi, made it out to Gaddafi, like all these like places, don't just forget. Don't just start your new lives and forget about Sudan.
You know what? I don't I think in this at this point I disagree.
Yeah, you can say
I
you can say
think
you're wrong, Karim.
no, I don't think you're I think I mean your opinion is valid. Let's say
Like, just
that.
not forget about the place.
But I think people who left, people who escaped, I don't hold them to any sort of like I don't attribute any responsibility to them because I think they are dealing with a lot. The fact that you have to
Okay.
like rebuild your life, the trauma that you came with, the trying to figure out your situation, they have a lot on their plate. To me, I think the responsibility, a lot of it falls on people who were not there, right? People like us who
Fair enough. I'll give you
are
that.
in the safety of where we're at, right? I think I don't want to say we have a responsibility because at the end of the day, it depends on how you feel about Sudan, right? Not all of us have that connection to to the country. Not
That's
all of
true.
us feel like we owe that place anything or we feel any sort of like belonging to that place. But I think if you do, if there's any part of you that feels a sense of belonging or a connection, or you have people there that you care about, I feel like whatever you can do, you should do. I think a lot of people just feel like, well, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
If I talk about it on Instagram, what's the point? Right?
Right.
If I
They're
donate
like, oh yeah,
$10, what's the
Sada's
point?
gonna let me know what's going on. I'm good.
And it's not
Right.
even
She's
that.
gonna
It's
send me
like
the link.
I think people just think that it doesn't matter, that like there's no impact to it, there's no real benefit to it, and they would be wrong.
Right.
They would absolutely be wrong.
I guess Sudan. I feel like a lot of so Arizona to last I checked on the stat had I think it said that we were the third largest Sudanese immigrant group.
Are
I
we
think in Arizona. Sorry, in the U.S. My bad. In the U.S. and I think
really?
like behind D.C. and like Minnesota or something. Like one of
That's
them. Like that's the
crazy.
last time I read that stat. It was like maybe a year or two ago, and I was like,
I believe it.
we're the third largest Sudanese immigrant like Sudanese like community here, like
That's so
immigrant community.
interesting.
So
I mean, I believe it. There are a
like,
lot of us
and if you
here.
think about it, I buy it.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
believe
buy
it.
it. First of all,
We
not that many Sudanese people traveling around this place anyway, so let's not act like there's like a million of them in Minnesota.
right,
No, it's probably like 5,000 versus 2,000.
right. I think the biggest is probably the DMV area, and then
Probably Glendale. Like you'd be surprised how many South Sudanese I see in Glen in my on my
really,
at the fries at the corner of
that's so
43rd
funny
and
because I
43rd and
don't
Bethany.
see any Sudanese people.
No, and I know they're South Sudanese, and I hear them talking. And I said, I know you're South Sudanese. I know
That's
into
so interesting.
Sudania
I
in
don't
my
see any Sudanese people, and I don't see any South Sudanese people. It's very
Glendale
rare.
all over. I see them,
That's so
but
interesting.
here in our diaspora, like we can, I know you guys have a connection to the Sudanese community.
Right.
If you talk about it all day and you rep it all day, and we all meet each other and
And that's the
we're all
thing.
connected. I know you have it. Let's
I
not
know
act
we're all
like it
talking about
is.
it at home, so you could talk about it online for like two
Yeah, it's
seconds.
like this is kind of why I did the show. Like I didn't want to do the show from the perspective of educating other Sudanese people. Fuck that. We already know. We already know what it
Right.
is. Like this show was really this episode. We talked about it yesterday. I want this for the perspective, for the American perspective, for the non-Sudanese perspective, for people who
Hmm.
don't know what's going on. Like
And there are so many of them.
yeah, there's so many of them because there's more of them than us.
But it's not even that. It's because like we said before, there's zero coverage. So
Yeah,
even the people who do make it a point to
what, three
like
pages down on
keep
CNN.
up, right, keep up to with like world affairs or whatever, are not hearing about it.
Yep. Like I'm not seeing this pop up. Like I'm seeing random news pop up on like my Instagram
And I'm
feeds and my
also
YouTube
not
feeds.
seeing my non-Sudanese friends talk about it
Oh yeah.
either.
I remember I told when this started. I told Assam. I said, "Hey, my Palestinian friends, we see your silence, my guy. Like we see your silence. Like my free Palestine, my free Palestine chants might get a little quieter after this if I don't hear nothing.
I'm not gonna drag any
But
specific
loud. But
community,
luckily I'll give them. No, call them out. Call
but
them out.
we tend to show up and show out for people
Yes, we
who
do.
don't
Show out
show
for
up
us.
or show out for us,
That was
and
actually
that's
part of
sad.
our friendships and relationships episodes. Like, do your friends really? Do you ride for your
Oop.
friends more than they ride for you? I think it went like live when we're recording this today, but you guys won't see this till like Saturday or something.
Well,
But yeah, that's 100% true. I will say, thankfully, my Palestinian friends have shown out, so shout out to
that's good.
y'all.
Shout out
But
to you. Shout out to them.
to the rest of you guys, look at your friends from other places,
Yeah,
right?
like just because this is happening to you. You're not in it, but it is happening to you as a Sudanese person. Any Sudanese person who has
Yeah.
people back home or any connection to Sudan, this is happening to you at some level. And if your friends are not getting that,
Yeah, I don't want to hear.
yikes.
I don't want to hear free Sudan once Coca-Cola starts lobbying because the gum
Right.
Arabic and now you guys are paying $7 a Coke bottle and
And
Powerade is super and
the fact
Prime
that
and
we
it's
right,
too
the fact
expensive.
that we gotta
So I don't
wait
want to hear
for
that when gum Arabic hits you. When the
Powerade supplies
resources.
to go down for people to care.
Well, that's kind of if you
just
think about it, it's kind of what happened to within
gross.
Ukraine as well. Like
Yeah,
Ukraine, it was free. Ukraine, and then everything got expensive because Ukraine, especially in
right.
technology, because Ukraine had a lot of minerals that are used in technologies making chips, like for computers and stuff like that. Once all that started to hit, then the tone shifted. Do we free
Right.
Ukraine or do we help Russia's take so we can stabilize all of this? Like,
Should
what's the
we just
deal?
right? Should we dead this
Right? Do we
or
dead this? Do we just squash this?
damn?
So yeah,
Capitalism is a trip.
I think this was a productive episode. A good good spot to end it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sada, for
No
showing up. Like
problem. Thank
really
you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
We got to go to the Ethiopian restaurant again.
Yes.
When
Yes.
did we go? Is it just after
Just
quarantine?
after COVID.
Yeah, when they
Yeah, just
started
after
opening stuff up again.
Man,
Oh, that was
what
great.
what a blur.
But yeah, so what we're going to do, guys, when we release this, I'm going to put a link in in the for the YouTube page, for the YouTube video when it launches, and the Spotify for those who want to listen to the audio. It'll take you to our page's link tree, and there will be a document titled Sudan resources that you guys can open and check on to really just see if there's anything you can help. I even have there's a WhatsApp there's a WhatsApp group for people who have pets that need to be checked up on. That
Yes,
was crazy.
I saw that
And I
today.
said, man,
I
Sudanese
was
people
like,
really thought of
oh
everything.
wow, we really have covered
I
everything.
usually thought I
Shout
thought
out to
Sudanese
us.
people I thought Sudanese people would have just been like, man, screw your dog, screw your
Me
cat.
too. I was really surprised when
And
people
these
were
people are like risking
evacuating
life to go check on your
or
cats and stuff.
evacuating cats and dogs. I was like, oh, okay.
Like our dogs are stuck back home,
Oh,
and they're being looked after. Like we have somebody there's
oh, that's
help look
good.
after, and we have our resources in order to just like send them money and
Yeah,
food
I
and
didn't
stuff.
know Sudanese people were animal lovers like that. I really did
Yeah.
not. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised.
Because I think like typically like especially like dogs, like I think Muslim nations aren't really
Yeah,
fan of dogs
not big
because
on
they're
dogs.
technically like unclean, so you
Right.
can't like have them inside the house and
But
like
even
pray and
even
stuff.
cats, like I didn't know people
So these people treat
had
cats like
cats
shit.
like that. Yeah,
They
that's why I
treat
was like,
cats.
y'all have like pet cats? That's crazy.
I'm surprised. Like I'm surprised. Honestly, I'm kind of lucky. My dad like made it out before
That's
because my
amazing.
dad is one of the few Sudanese people who like one of the few members who do not want like foreign passports. And we were joking with him. I said, Dad, your ass would have been stuck here.
Right,
So we would have had mom and Sarah
man.
dip, and you would have been stuck here.
Oof,
So he got lucky like 2-3 days, literally like 2-3 days before,
that's so
went for like a
amazing.
work trip. Boom, everything gone. Now he's stuck.
My dad went to Sudan in December, and he wanted to stay until April, and for whatever reason, I was like, no,
No,
that's too long. You need to come back. You're by yourself, like whatever. And he ended up coming back
like
in February, so a while ago. But I was like, had he stayed until April like he was supposed to? Oh my god.
no, it would have just been
Yeah, I
it would have
can't
been
even
madness.
imagine.
But yeah, thank you so much, Sara. I really appreciate to the people who stayed and listened to the very end of the show. This has been episode 21 of Lost, or 22 of Lost in the Desert podcast. All right.